Hello there, I'm Amy,
And I'm Maddie.
and this is the second episode of Ghosts, Creatures and Scares Oh My, a podcast where we share our love of the show Supernatural and dive into the fascinating and terrifying real life legends behind the ghosts and creatures featured in each episode of Supernatural.
This episode is called The Wendigo and Cannibal Tales, and we explore the origins and real accounts of this phenomenon.
Right, so we've made it episode 2. It's been quite a nice week, hasn't it, this week?
It has been delightful, nice couple of weeks off work.
I think any time when you're off work is nice.
Oh,
You've
100%,
you've
yeah.
been welcomed into my maternity life.
Yeah, it's not too bad. You've got
It's amazing.
quite a nice time that you've got.
Yeah, so we did the standard kind of National Trust trips, didn't we?
Hmm.
Yeah, we haven't been on holiday this year, so I've been really jealous of people. So if you don't live in the UK, you might not know, but the National Trust, it's like is it a company or a foundation that manages these big stately homes, and you usually have sprawling estates. And yeah, they're quite expensive to go to, but it's a really nice day out. So that was our version of a holiday, wasn't it?
Just something nice,
It
nice,
has
nice,
been
and
good, but it's
nice
very
weather. Bit of nice weather, hasn't it?
yeah, kind of. We did kind of get the nice weather, but it's very different when we used to go when we were first going out. We used to be like hand in hand. I would have a tiny bag with a lip gloss in and a purse, and now it is actually like a military operation getting out of the house with a 5-month-old, 5-month old. It is actually like it is an operation, isn't it? And there's that passive aggressive, I changed the last nappy kind of thing. But no, it has been really nice. So I hope you've all had a really nice week as well, and we're going to launch into episode 2. So, in case you don't know, the show Supernatural launched in 2005, starring Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles as Sam and Dean Winchester, brothers who hunt various monsters and entities to a soundtrack of 70s rock as they drive through the heartland of America in a pretty amazing 1967 Chevrolet Impala. So each week we're going to basically work our way through each episode from season 1. We're very briefly going to recap the episode, but focus more on the actual monster that emerges from each episode. We're going to explore, like we did last week, the origin of this creature or entity and the real life stories that surround it. We react to the legends and we discuss how likely it is that each entity actually exists. So this week we're looking at episode 2 of season 1 of Supernatural. It's the Wendigo episode. So Matty, could you just let us know what happened in that episode?
Yeah, so Sam and Dean head to Blackwater Ridge. They meet Haley Collins, whose brother has gone missing alongside his friends on a camping trip, and head into the woods together with her other brother Ben to search for him. Nice little fact here, but Ben is the Han Solo in the Solo movie.
Oh,
Oh yeah,
what's he called in real life?
I can't remember.
Oh, don't dang it.
Sam does some research and finds that people go missing in Blackwater at regular intervals every 23 years. When the group reach the campsite of Haley's brother, they find ripped tents and damaged equipment. With the help of their father's journal, Sam and Dean realise that they are facing a Wendigo. The next day, Sam and Dean explain that the Wendigo means evil that devours. They were once human but had become something else, I get my words right, when forced to eat human flesh to survive. Tommy may still be alive as Wendigos hibernate and like to store that live food, so they follow the Wendigo's bloody trail, leading them to the creature's lair.
Yeah, it was a solid second episode, I thought this one.
Well, of every episode of Supernatural, there's very few that
Yeah, but for me,
don't go
when
with it.
you'd kind of seen it, you'd watched every episode again and again, but it's very different to the first one because it was more kind of creature based
Yeah,
rather than like
rather than
spiritual.
Spirit. Yeah.
It's a bit terrifying when it goes. I think it's funny, isn't it, when we go camping in the well, when we go camping, I don't go camping, just to clarify. Well, we have been
We've been
camping once.
a
It
couple
wasn't,
times,
yeah, it wasn't great, but I did Leeds Festival when I was 17, 5 nights, and that was we watched Woodstock 99, didn't we? I was trying to compare the two, even though it was very
very
different.
different.
I was trying to amp up how dramatic it was, but yeah, it's still not for us. But anyway, when we go camping in the UK, I don't feel like we have the fear that Americans have got to deal with. Like you've got bears, wolves, then you've got things like Wendigos, Bigfoot. If you're into the supernatural side, we've just got kind of where can I charge my phone or go to the toilet. I think I'd be terrified going to camping in America.
Yeah, I wouldn't fancy it with all the bears.
So anyway, getting back on track with the story, today we're going to look at the backstory of the Wendigo, and I've decided to go a different route. We had a bit of an argument, didn't we? Because I was going to go down the werewolf kind of strand with it, but we've decided to go to cannibal tales. With that's a really prevalent theme in the story.
Because Wendigos aren't werewolves, even remotely.
But sorry, do you not think that? they're a human that something's happened to them, and then they transform into something, and they come from Native American legends. I thought we could link the two.
Because werewolves are men who transform into, well, in my opinion, should be wolf-like
Yeah,
beings that stand on two legs,
yeah,
not the
you're
ones that we
right.
see these days that are just giant wolves. But
Don't have a go at
um,
Twilight. Do
but
not come at Twilight.
Wendigos are on that. Wendigos are just people who have
Yeah,
went crazy and ate human flesh, and therefore they've transformed because of it. Not that they
yeah,
can transform on key.
like zombies. But anyway, so we've decided to go down after the Wendigo. We're going to look at cannibal tales. So we do apologise. It does veer slightly off the supernatural track, but hopefully you'll find the tales interesting today. So the story of the Wendigo, or the legend of the Wendigo, I should say, it is a Native American legend, and it is of a humanoid evil spirit. And these tales tend to be prevalent in the Great Lake areas of the USA, and also some parts of Canada. The Wendigo is said to be a giant humanoid creature that is malevolent towards others. It is fueled by greed and desire to cannibalize humans because it used to be human itself, then it succumbed to eating flesh to survive, and that turned into a Wendigo creature. A Wendigo is tall, gaunt, fast moving, and has the ability to mimic the voices of others to trick its victims. It's kind of like a zombie, isn't it? I think when I'm reading this. Did you not think?
Not at all. No, how is it? It's like a zombie.
Kind
Zombies
of.
have lost them. Like they've turned into mindless creatures, haven't they?
And they've got to eat.
Whereas Wendigos are a bit more calculated, like
Yeah,
especially
they've got a
based
bit
off
more
the
conscious.
episode. If
Yeah.
they can mimic a human voice to trick people into coming out of
Yeah,
the
just
thing,
a
then
kind of like a zombie. In a way. Yeah, we're not going to agree on this, so we're going to stick to the cannibal side of it.
they
But
eat human flesh like
they eat
zombies.
human flesh. So they've been in a situation in the wild where they've succumbed to having to eat another human, and this has transformed them, according to Native American legend, because it's such like a sin, it's such a bad thing to do, into this awful creature that's doomed to kind of roam the wilderness. Are they immortal? This is something I didn't come across. I'm just popped into my head now.
Um,
Or they're just like,
I feel like the maybe longer lives. I'm not 100% on the
you have to check
immortal.
that
Yeah,
one. So you might foresee a Wendigo approaching as it brings with it an air of ice and also a really foul stench, and they move very rapidly, which you do see in the supernatural episode. A quote that I found online was from a teacher from Ontario called Basil Johnston, and he described the Wendigo. There's a lot of big words in this, so I'm going to retake my time. I need to speak slower anyway. The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones, with its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash grey of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets. The Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton, recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody. Unclean and suffering from suppuration of the flesh, the Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odour of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. So that really kind of sums up really eloquently what it looks like, doesn't it? You can
in
imagine it just
structural. Yeah,
being, eerie odour of death and decomposition. It is kind of like a zombie. I'm going to stick with my theory. Um, but it's I can't try to describe if you've never heard of a Wendigo, if you've never seen the episode. If you Google image them, they're often pictured as having antlers, weirdly enough. But I think it's more just like a humanoid, very tall, lean, gaunt.
I think they've done a bang up job in Supernatural of what they
Yeah,
would
it
look
is
like.
terrifying, isn't
Another
it?
one that actually it makes us think of is that movie where the guys cutting. It might be another episode of Supernatural where they're cutting pieces of humans off and then sticking them onto himself. It's a little bit different,
That's
but
a bit like
it's
Jeepers Creepers. Well, that's Jeepers Creepers, isn't it?
yeah, a bit like Jeepers Creepers as well.
Yeah. Oh, do I get one? So it's like Jeepers Creepers.
I'll
Maybe
give you
not
that one.
zombies and werewolves,
Give you that
but
one.
um, yes. So sorry, werewolves, wendigos. They're very thin and gaunt due to starvation, and they're never satisfied, which is kind of like their curse, really. They're always hunting for the next victim. They stalk the woodlands, targeting campers and hikers. That would be absolutely terrifying. I'm sticking to my thing that I'm never going to go camping in America. Definitely not. It's just I don't know. There'll be lots of people listening who do, and it's completely safe, and that they're savvy and they know what they're doing. But I think us two, coming from England, going to camping in America would just be a recipe for disaster. Or camping anyway, to be honest.
Yeah, not for me. I don't think. I think bears will be bad enough, but if you do believe in Wendigos, then imagine running into something like that in
Exactly.
the forest.
Or if you got your mind is so kind of occupied with it, and you could convince yourself. Um, and also something that else that popped into my mind when I was thinking about this was Bigfoot. Am I right? Am I right? And you're probably going to say I'm wrong, but it's kind of like Bigfoot
Nah,
a little bit, just with maybe the setting. The setting's like Bigfoot, not the legend
yeah,
itself.
forest, yeah, the forest.
There's trees.
There's trees,
There's
so
a tree or
it's
two.
similar.
Apparently the Wendigo made a couple of appearances near a town called Rosesu. I think I'm saying that right, probably not, in northern Minnesota from the late 1800s towards the 1920s. And each time that it was reported, an unexpected death followed, and finally it was seen no more. And the last sighting was in Ontario, and it was a creature seen by an American trucker in 1997. So the reason I put that down was because it's kind of like last week when we talked about these omens of doom, that you see something and then next thing you know someone dies. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah,
Like the woman in white, the banshee.
120 year span, so
Yeah,
maybe they do have longer lives.
yeah, definitely. But it could be a different one, couldn't it? So there's not lots of sightings of the Wendigo. That's the reason that we've done half and half this episode of the Wendigo and some different tales. But it's more of a legend, and when I've done some research on it, a lot of people actually think, people who don't believe in the Wendigo, they actually think it's more of a metaphor, a bit like we were talking about La Llorona. So that Native American people would tell their families is a kind of warning against the greed and capitalism of well, not just of America, of the whole world, that, you're not going to literally eat someone, but if you're consumed by greed and wanting to get more and more money and possession, you could turn into a really awful creature. Not
Mm.
literally, but so I thought that was quite interesting. So there have been some accounts of a creature stalking the wilderness of North America by hikers over the years. In that, this is a story that's inspired by these accounts of the Wendigo. So one Friday evening, John had finished work early, loaded up his truck, and headed off to the dense woodland close to the Rocky Mountains area. It was late September, and the weather was still warm but starting to cool slightly as fall set in. It was the ideal weather for a camping trip, he decided. Sometimes he took his older brother along with him, but Jeff was busy with his kids that weekend, so John thought it'd be a chance to decompress after a long, stressful week. The drive itself was quite short, and after parking up his truck and struggling through the trees with his equipment alone, he eventually found the perfect spot quite deep into the woods. On the way, he'd passed some college students who had already made a start on the beers around a campfire, and one or two more experienced campers like himself, who nodded in acknowledgement as he passed. He went deeper into the woods than he'd usually go, but he was keen to avoid any late night drunken conversations with frat boys, so he was in a remote, isolated part of the woods. By the time he'd set up his tent and had put himself a steak on his camping stove to sizzle away, it was dark. The woods took on a more sinister, threatening atmosphere by night, and John imagined the hungry eyes of a dangerous animal watching him from the trees. He shook the thought away and opened his own bottle of beer. Hard earned after his week, he thought. He'd only brought 3 bottles. Any more and he'd be tipsy. He liked to have his wits about him when he was out in the wilderness. He passed the hours playing solitaire and then decided to call it a night sometime after midnight. He slept well and had no trouble drifting off to sleep despite the uncomfortable base of his tent. He was awoken abruptly at 2 a.m. He wasn't sure what had roused him, but after listening out for a minute or two, he tried to get back to his slumber. 10 minutes later, the faint sound of something scuttling outside of his tent made him bolt upright. He feared wolves, and his heart beat furiously in his chest. Cautiously, he unzipped his tent and peered out into the darkness. Nothing could be seen. In fact, it was unnaturally quiet. John pulled his jumper around him as the air took on an icy chill, and he noticed the foul stench of rotten meat, something that he couldn't explain. He was scared now. He was about to retreat back to his tent when a flicker of movement from the corner of his eye caught his attention. He turned to see two horrifying yellow eyes peering right at him from no more than 50 meters away. He dived back into his tent and zipped up the door. He fumbled for his gun, something he'd never had to use in all of his years of camping in the wild. The scuttling sounds were louder and closer now. Rapid swishing movements could be heard from just outside of his tent, and when he shone his torch at the tent wall, the lightning quick flash of a shadow raced past. He was petrified. There was limited cell service out in the sticks, and he now wished he'd stayed closer to the other campers he'd seen earlier. He was on his own, he realised. He knew the movements were too quick to be human, but he racked his brain as to what type of animal it could be. The eyes were about 6 feet from the ground. What animal was over 6 feet tall and standing on 2 feet? He shivered from both fear and the onset of cold. He decided that the only thing he could do was to sit put and wait it out. Clutching his weapon tightly, he drew a blanket around his shoulders and waited. The night was long. Whatever the thing was continued to dart backwards and forwards. He'd heard the smashing of objects and even thought he heard the high-pitched voice of a woman calling for help, but the voice had been off somehow, mocking and false, so he'd ignored the pleas. At one point at around 3 a.m., the thing had scratched the tent, leaving the material torn and ragged. He thought he was done for then, but light came eventually, and he slowly braved the outside of his tent. His camping gear had been ransacked and left scattered everywhere, but at least that thing had gone. Hastily, he picked up his belongings and headed back to his truck. He passed one of the lone campers again on his journey back to civilization, and he stopped to ask if he'd had any trouble in the night. The man looked dour and had shaken his head. He told John that everything he'd explained sounded like a Wendigo to him. John had vaguely heard of the legend, but had been sure of the specifics of the tale. When he got home that afternoon, he looked up Wendigos, and his heart froze when he realised that what he'd experienced ticked every box. He was lucky he knew, and decided if he ever braved camping again, he'd not be foolish enough to go so deep into the wild again. That territory was taken, and not by humans.
Well, I mean, he's only got himself to blame for attracting something, hasn't he? Chucking
Do
a
you think?
steak on a stove in the middle of the woods. What a nut job.
People do
Absolute
that, don't they?
mentalist. Steaks.
Oh, like the camping food, I would have thought.
Camping food. Taking rich food out there, ain't
Yeah, it's like you've got the whole like cast of all the zombies and things.
he?
Yeah, that is quite scary. So I must stress that this story isn't real, but it is based very closely on some real life accounts because the accounts that we came across were very small and they weren't didn't elaborate as such. We did, that this story just sums up some real accounts that we came across, and it is really terrifying, but actually quite similar to Supernatural episode. I thought the whole, the mimicking of
Yeah.
voices and the tent and the rapid
Well,
movements.
especially at the beginning, considering they're all in the tents and they hear something outside,
So
and then one of them
yeah.
gets taken while having a pee.
Having a pee. They tend to strike at night then. So what is it about these creatures? Is it because it's the nocturnal, or is it actually not real at all and our brains go into kind of meltdown at night when darkness sets in?
Like, all the fact that on a night time it'd be harder for others to see, whereas they're supposed to have a good hunting skills in the night because they can
Yeah, I mean
see better.
it could just be an animal though, couldn't it? One of these wild
Oh, very easily. I
animals.
mean, it could, like, something standing on 2 feet. That's over 6 foot could easily have been a bear.
Yeah, and it could have been, I mean, it could have been a person really, or could have just been his imagination. I mean, it could have been anyone out in the wild, someone homeless, wandered and
I mean, if they've
smelled a
smelt a steak from however far away, yeah,
steak.
I bet. 100%.
True
Something smells good in
yeah.
that distance.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If they've been desperate and hungry, they could have just waited, been watching, they've seen he's gone to sleep, and then ransacked the equipment.
Steaks back on the menu, boys.
I'm taught myself, I'm taught myself out of it again. You're meant to be the or Mr. Open-minded. That what you said last week, wasn't
Aye,
it?
for ghosts and stuff.
So
Maybe
do
not
you think
this.
you think ghosts are more believable than creatures? Because I would argue the opposite. For me, I'm more likely to believe Bigfoot and werewolves and things because it's that they're alive, they're
To be
not.
fair, probably a mix of them all, but
But yeah,
for a story like this,
so
uh,
we've decided to park the Wendigo there and dive into some really creepy cannibal tales. Hopefully you're not eating. If you are, please stop. What comes to mind when I say the word cannibal for you?
someone who eats human flesh.
Yeah, but in pop culture, what would come
Um,
to mind?
Probably the IT crowd when
Oh, that is brilliant.
he picks up the wrong ad
He
and
thinks he's going
he
for
thinks he's
dinner.
going to watch a film and have some food and instead he's going to get eaten.
Yeah, I love that. And the fine young cannibal joke. But yeah, Hannibal Lecter, obviously that comes into mind
Yeah,
straight away. Sounds of the Lambs is one of my favourite films. I could watch that again and again. There's something really, it's weird. It's because you're vegetarian, you're really strict. I'm not. So what is it about? We eat animal meat and it's awful, really. What is it about eating human flesh that's so evil and awful?
it's because we're humans. It's eating your own in it.
Yeah, maybe I suppose so. When I was looking at the cannibal tales, I wanted to try my best to try to keep it on the supernatural theme, but we did veer off slightly. But one thing I did come across was that is something I've heard in the back of my head, back of my head, the voices, something I've come across in the
Reiterations.
past, I think, was that in some cultures they believed soldiers would eat the flesh and organs of their enemies because they believed that it gave them the strength. Or, for example, if they ate eyes, it would give them better vision, or they ate someone's heart, it would give them more courage and to be more ferocious in battle.
Hmm.
This is going way back. It kind of reminded me a little bit like, when people would say carrots help you see in the dark. It's a bit
It's
of
a bit different. You need some carrot out we see in the dark, or if you eat someone's eyes, that'll truly give you the sight.
yeah, don't worry, I'll tell our daughter that one. So one story I came across that really is not supernatural at all, but it really interested me was I'd never heard of this one actually. Was in 1944, September the 2nd, there was a group of American pilots during World War II who had the plane had gone down in the Pacific, and they were captured by the Japanese. So what happened was these prisoners of war they would be tortured, killed, and actually some of the Japanese soldiers did eat them. The reason that really fascinated me because straight away I was like, God, that's horrifying for them and for the families back home. I think the government actually covered it up because it was so awful. But guess who was the one person to survive?
I would say from your sheet, George H.W. Bush.
How did you guess? Thought that was really interesting. So the father of George W. Bush, who we know as of our generation, we know George W. Bush. His father was only 20 years old at the time, and he was president in 1989 to 1993, and he managed to escape. I just think that's really crazy. Imagine telling that as a story. The future president was escaped cannibals. I
Yeah,
think that's really.
yeah,
I thought it was a really
it's a
interesting
pretty good
story.
story to tell people
Yeah,
when having a
isn't
drink.
it? Yeah, it's better than any story I've got. And then have you heard of the Donner Party?
Haven't.
So that's another really famous. That's one that when you say cannibals, people's mind tends to go to the Donner Party. I thought you might have said that before. So the Donner Party was a group of American pioneers. They migrated from California in a wagon train from the Midwest. So this was in 1846 to 1847. It was a period in between. But due to some mishaps along the way, they spent the winter snowbound in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Some of the migrants that actually had to resort to eating each other, the dead members of the party to survive. So these are people who succumbed to starvation, sickness, and extreme cold. The reason that they were actually making this really dangerous, perilous trip was because they were trying to get to somewhere where they could farm maybe more fertile ground, and they just chose the wrong way to go. Really, it was a really bad mistake. And when winter set in, they were kind of stranded and isolated. So by early November, the migrants had reached the Sierra Nevada. They became trapped by early, unexpected heavy snowfall near somewhere called Truckee Lake, now Donner Lake. Obviously, must have changed its name in respect of them. And it was really high up in the mountains. The food supplies they ran dangerously low, and in mid-December, some of the group actually set out on foot, desperate to try and obtain help. So rescuers from California attempted to reach the migrants, but the first relief party did not actually arrive until the middle of February 1847, which is, I think, the most brutal time for winter. Is for us, anyways, January and Feb. And I
Mm.
imagine in that part of America would have been really extreme weather. Um, so after almost 4 months of the wagon train ordeal, only of the 87 members of the party, 48 survived, and they'd actually survived because they had to resort to eating the deceased members of the party. So my question to you is, how long would it take for you to give into that?
What was 10 minutes?
Yeah, but here's my second question. As a vegetarian, would it be more of a kind of, I don't know, obviously no one would want to do that, but would it be even harder for you?
Probably not. No, be hard if it was animals.
So you'd rather eat me than like a chicken?
100%.
That's a bit scary. Yeah, you know what, I'm really food orientated, aren't I?
Yeah, you.
Very food orientated. I'm the kind of like
You'd be killing off the weakest member and just saying, "I fell down the hole over there." Little do they know that you pushed them down.
Amy's got steak on the go.
Yeah.
Not Jimmy, I swear. No, but I think I don't know. I was what I was going to say there, but I am a very greedy person, so I think if I don't, the people who say they forgot to have dinner, I never understand that. To me, I'm always thinking about the
That's
next
because you've
meal.
got the next meal. You mean the meal's 4 weeks in advance?
Well, anyone out there who plans grocery shopping, you do have to think about what you're going to be cooking. Otherwise, it's like a free for all in the shop. So anyway, another one. This one is Flight 571. Now I always thought this was a dinner party. For some reason, the word dinner party in my brain goes to this story, but they couldn't be more different. I mean, this one was in 1972. It happened on Friday the 13th of October 1972, there was a flight from Uruguay taken off, Flight 571. And on this flight were a rugby team with their friends and families and some other supporters, and of course, other passengers and crew. The flight sadly got into difficulty and it struck a mountain. It killed three crew members and nine passengers immediately. Some actually died very tragically soon after the crash due to hot weather conditions and the severity of injuries. But during the following 72 days, the survivors suffered extreme hardships, including exposure, starvation, and an avalanche, which led to the death of a further 13 passengers. Two of the survivors managed to hike to Chile to raise the alarm, and on the 23rd of December, the remaining survivors were saved and they made headlines across the world. Later, it was reported that once the food supplies had gone and they were on the verge of starvation, survivors had actually resorted to eating the flesh of their teammates who had perished. So that's quite similar, even though completely different, timelines,
Hmm.
different situation. It's a plane crash. Similar kind of situation, though, isn't it? Being
Just again, as soon as people
driven.
get driven to the point of starvation and stuff, they
Yeah,
start looking about.
but it's really sad. I mean, we shouldn't really joke about these things because imagine being put into that situation
Hmm.
where you'd have to actually resort to that. Um, so the thing that stuck out to me about this one was the fact that it happened on Friday the 13th. That
Funny,
was
funny
quite.
coincidence, isn't it?
I thought that might veer we're back slightly to the supernatural a little bit because I do apologise. These stories have been more kind of historical rather than in quite gruesome actually. And another thing I was going to say was that this Native American legend of the Wendigo eating people and then this horrible thing happened to them. I do personally believe that the Wendigo is false and that it's a legend because I think anyone who is stuck and has to survive, it's human nature. They shouldn't be cursed. I don't think they'd be cursed. It's just a horrible thing to have happened.
Maybe
But
if it's for that though, it's that they've got a liking of eating the meat, and
maybe,
therefore they'll
yeah.
continue doing it even past the point of
When
them
they need that
needing
before
to.
they need to.
And I think if it's giving them stronger, if it's making them stronger and giving them longer life and stuff, maybe they're just like, oh, I'm going to continue doing it, and then that's when the evil
Well, like you could say
takes
that
over,
about
isn't it?
us. I mean, we don't need to eat animals anymore.
Can't say that about us because I'm vegetarian
Yeah,
anyway.
but well, me then and people who eat meat, we don't need to eat meat.
All monsters, the lot of
Yeah,
yous. Monsters.
slippery slope. But yeah, you could. I personally think it's more of a metaphor. But yeah. Anyway, Friday the 13th. What springs to mind with that one? Do you believe in that or
What,
not?
Friday the 13th being unlucky?
Being unlucky, yeah.
Um, I wouldn't say I overly believe in it, but at the same time, I do. If I can stay in on Friday the 13th, I probably do.
No, I was going to say I'm exactly the same. I don't class myself as a superstitious person, but then when I actually sat
I take the
down,
chance.
well, yeah, but when I sat down and thought about it, I actually am quite superstitious. So Friday the 13th, if something's happening on that date, I'm like, oh, I don't want to go out. I'd rather not. I'm glad when it's like an uneventful day.
Hmm.
I don't know why, just in case anything happens. So do you do anything superstitious?
Do I do anything superstitious?
Yeah, well, sorry, is that the right phrase to avoid, like
Oh, right, where
superstitions,
if you, I don't like walking under
Yeah, that's what I mean.
ladders and
Same,
that
yeah.
sort of stuff. Again, not that I overly believe in it, but just in case.
And it's for me, it's I like to say hello to a magpie.
Oh,
You
you've
you
always got to
laughed at
see two,
me.
haven't you? There's one's for Zorro.
Two for joy.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Isn't it one for sorrow, two for joy? Yeah,
yeah.
but no, it's not just that. But isn't it? You say hello, Mrs. Magpie or Mr. Magpie. How are you today? Otherwise, you get bad luck.
I don't know.
That sticks in my head. Then there's mirrors. 7 years bad luck.
Off you smash a mirror, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to try and aim not to smash a mirror anyway, don't you? You don't
Well,
want
we
to
do
glass all over the
try.
place.
And then
It's easier for some not to.
and then black cats. That has happened to me so often. I think in our state there must be like a coven or something because there's so many black cats roaming around. And when they dart in front of your car, you're just like, that is bad luck as well. The final story that we're going to do today, we're going to put in, but it popped in my mind the last minute before we came to record this, and it's called The Missing Rockefeller. Have you heard of this one?
I don't think so, no.
No, so Michael Clark Rockefeller, he was the son of, or the grandson of American financier John D. Rockefeller Jr. So, one of these elite American families. And the reason that all this stuff interests me is because, I'm a bit of a tinfoil hat person, aren't I? So, the Illuminati, it's very closely linked to these families who built America, who have this obscene amount of wealth. But he was what probably Brits would say having a gap year. He went off to have a little travel around somewhere. That's what they tend to do, isn't it? And he was ended up in the Asmat region of southwestern Netherlands in New Guinea. So it was in 1961, November the 17th. He was with another person, and they were they were just basically exploring the place, and they ended up getting capsized in the boat, and it was swamped and overturned. They tried to swim for help. He's reported to have tried to swim off, but he went missing basically. And the family back in America, it was huge. The missing Rockefeller. Where did he go? People say that he swam to safety and that he actually did die from exposure, exhaustion, or drowning. But later on, it came out that actually he was legally declared dead in 1964, but there was reports from a local tribe who said actually no, he did actually swim to safety onto the shore, and the tribe ate him because you've heard of these tribes who they've never been discovered by civilization. They stay well away.
Hmm.
Not to I'd be careful how I say this because I don't want to tar tribes with the same brush, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of Pirates of the Caribbean. Obviously, that'll be an exaggerated example, but
Hmm.
where he was eaten. Obviously, different lots of different tribes around the world.
Bondagalaka.
But you know what I'm trying to say. I'll be careful how I say that. So yeah, that was interesting. So was he drowned or was he eaten? So it came out. They said no, he definitely he drowned. He didn't even reach the surface. But they think that no, he actually did, and then he was. He's an outsider, a bit of a strange person that actually ate him as part of their ritual.
It would be a pretty grim way to go.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, I think.
Getting your
Would you
child
rather
to
drown?
survive. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, definitely. It's terrifying, that, isn't it? I mean, it's like when people go to these places, I take my hat off to them because they're obviously more adventurous than I am, but that's one of the risks that you're going to come across. So, how likely is it to round up that Wendigos exist? What do you think? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's probably more likely that you've got cannibals
Oh
than
yeah, of
Wendigos.
course, yeah,
um,
definitely.
but I suppose I don't know.
You don't know, you haven't decided.
Undecided.
Haven't convinced you.
Yeah.
I mean, there could be wild feral children who've grown up. That's another thing that I thought. You hear of these children who've been raised by wolves. Essentially, I mean, it can be, but that can be made up as well. But it could be like feral people in the wild, homeless people who've resorted to just stealing people's bits from the campfire. But when you're at night, senses are heightened. You may convince yourself that they have yellow eyes and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, not as convinced as we are as women in white.
Yeah.
I'm hoping now this episode, I'll be totally honest, creatures aren't my cup of tea. I'm more about the ghosts and the legends, so I'm really, really excited about next week. It is going to be my favourite one. It's going to be a longer one. We've got so many stories, I should say. It's all to do with ghosts in the water, ghosts at sea, which just absolutely fascinates me. So thanks so much for listening to this episode of Ghosts, Creatures and Scares Oh My.
Please make sure to leave a review and let us know what you thought of today's episode. Feedback will really help us out, and we really want to know your thoughts to help us to hone our podcast.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. So I did actually set this up now. You can find us on Instagram at Ghost Creatures and Scares or My. I'm getting my head around Facebook, but I believe that there is a group. I have set up a private group on there that you can join. So again, Ghost Creatures and Scares or My. And please email us at ghostscreaturesandscares@gmail.com if you have any supernatural tales that you'd like to share, whether they're linked to what we've been talking about or not. Especially if you've got any tales to do with ghosts at sea or ghosts in the water, that'd be really great for next week. Thank you so much again, and we'll be back next week to discuss chilling real life accounts of ghosts doomed to haunt their watery graves, be it lakes, rivers, or the sea. Also, other supernatural legends of the oceans who are just as sinister. Have a
Have a
great
great
week.
weekend.
Hello. Hello there, I'm Amy,
And I'm Maddie.
and this is the second episode